Welcome to Coming Attractions. With me this week is Nick Milligan and Dan Flegg. My name's Joe Frost. This week we have all gone to see Kong Skull Island, which is, I guess we'd call a pretty hard reboot of the King Kong franchise. And Nick's got an overview of the film.
Thanks, Joe. In Kong Skull Island, the chunky monkey returns, resurrected with the full gamut of modern CGI trickery, for the second installment in Legendary's burgeoning monsterverse, following Gareth Edwards' 2014 film Godzilla. With spectacular set pieces and a strangely uneven tone, young director Jordan Vogt-Roberts, taking a giant leap in budget after his acclaimed 2013 indie The Kings of Summer, borrows heartily from both the 1933 and 1976 versions of King Kong. The result is both an enjoyable popcorn spectacle and an aimless rumble in the jungle. Skull Island, like the 1976 film that starred Jeff Bridges and Jennifer Lang in her big screen debut, is set in the early 1970s. America has just pulled the pin on Vietnam, leaving military personnel relieved, frustrated, and bitter. We quickly meet Bill Randa, played by John Goodman, and geologist Houston Brooks, played by Corey Hawkins, who we saw as Dr. Dre in the film Straight Outta Compton. They work for a government organisation called Monarch. They convince a senator to fund a reconnaissance mission to an uncharted island. They recruit former British SAS captain and expert tracker James Conrad, played by Tom Hiddleston, and a helicopter squadron known as the Sky Devils. They're led by Preston Packard, Samuel L. Jackson, an intense, single-minded United States Army Lieutenant Colonel. The ragtag Sky Devils are assigned one last mission, to escort a group of scientists to Skull Island. This wouldn't be a King Kong flick without a blonde beauty, and in this instance, it's photojournalist and peace activist Mason Weaver, played with measured tenderness and tenacity by Academy Award winner Brie Larson. All right, guys. First question. Does $185 million buy you a good film?
It can.
But not this time.
What happened? What went wrong?
You want to take this?
I mean, what went right? It just was... It was all over the place. There was no focus. It sort of tried to be a whole bunch of different things. It wanted to be comedic, but it also wanted to touch on the horrors of war from the semi-post-traumatic stress perspective of people that they never really delve into. At the root of it all, it's supposed to be a monster movie, though, and while it did do that, there was... And really, do you know what? King Kong, hey, star of the piece, and for good reason. He's supposed to be. The movie's named after him. That's the whole part of it that it really, you could say they did quite well. But there were too many characters. None of them were developed. The pacing was all over the joint. It was just... Flag, you pick up for me. I don't know.
It just had narrative inconsistency. I mean, that's the real problem. You can touch on elements and leave them as red herrings throughout a film like this, but as you've mentioned, it's a giant monster film, and it just didn't feel like it had any real direction throughout the whole piece. They had a fairly stellar cast, you know, as you've mentioned, Nick. You had John Goodman. You have, I guess this isn't giving too much away, but there is can we talk about the crazy guy that's in it?
No, he's
in the trailer.
Over the trailers. John C. Reilly was a big part of this movie.
Yeah, Goodman, Samuel L. Jackson, Brie Larson, as you mentioned, and Hiddleston as well. But the characters are never really fleshed out, and they, you know, with these kind of films, you're salivating for the moments with Kong, who is there, but in between all of that, you have this ensemble cast that really need to carry where the film's going. It doesn't feel like you really know where the film actually is going throughout, and they're one-dimensional characters. I mean, the amount of times that I saw Hiddleston standing there just kind of brooding in like a Chesty Bonds t-shirt with like a machine gun hanging over his shoulder, but not really doing anything else. It got to me after a while. I was just like, where is this going? You know, I don't know. I felt...
And I think, well, it's easy to touch on the half a dozen big-name stars that featured in it. There were half a dozen secondary characters who got as much airtime and got as much play as the big ones. I think Samuel L. Jackson probably, you would say, perhaps commanded. I think maybe he had enough nous and maybe enough foresight to be like, this movie's not going anywhere, so you know what? We're going to do some stuff about me. This guy is going to be your single-minded, focused, hardcore, grizzled army veteran, and I'm going to have, a purpose in the film. And then there's like 11 other characters who dither about what it is they want to do in their time on Skull Island. Nick, what do you think?
Well, it's true. I mean, I think for me, I agree with everything you guys said. For me, Samuel L. Jackson probably has the most to sink his teeth into. He does a lot with very little screen time and very little writing to do with his character. But there is a reference made into the film, I think it's John Goodman to Tom Hiddleston's character, where he says something like that men that go to war are looking for something. And you don't remain in a war zone unless you've found it, basically. So this idea that he's searching for something, we see a scene with him early on where Vietnam has been basically called off for the United States, and he looks very restless. He doesn't want to go back to normal life. And when, as we see in the trailer, in vivid detail in the trailer, as it's done quite well in the movie, in this very Apocalypse Now sort of sequence, King Kong swats all of his soldiers out of the sky and wipes half of them out. He then develops this sort of Captain Ahab obsession with Kong.
A new challenge exists for him.
A new war, really.
Yeah.
And he makes it his mission to bring him down, and that sets him on this interesting collision course. But that's sort of the really only interesting thing that happens in the film. It's a very soulless exercise, and it's because the characterization's really thin. Like you said, there was way too many characters, too many soldiers, too many scientists. It would have been better to have a few peripheral people, but core people. And it also, I guess the writer's belief must have been, get them to the island as quickly as we can. That's what people want to see, is them on the island running from monsters. But what they don't do is really spend any significant time painting and fleshing out who these people are. By the time they get to the island and they're flying into the storm, which again we see in the trailer, there's this fairly spectacular sequence where the choppers have to fly through a storm. By the time that happens and they're already going into the thick of what's going to unfold, we don't really know them well enough to give a shit.
I agree. You don't care. You're on the island, but I mean, other than them being a one-dimensional vehicle for your arrival at this foreign land, you don't care.
Yeah.
And the thing that bothered me the most about it is when they attempted to grab your attention and really say, here's a reason to care, it was the cheesiest stuff, like really, really bad. Like, there's one soldier who's like, I just want to get home to my son, and he's writing him notes, and it's like, and they try to explain, like he's having difficulty writing a letter to his son, and it's just done.
Yeah, it's like film school sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But just gotta get
again,
back for my kid. It's just like, oh my, this can't be happening. This
But
cannot
they
be
start
happening right now.
using
We're
it-
past this.
But they don't bother to follow through on even the most cheesy and film school of I guess almost cheat sheet things. Oh yeah, you'll care about him if we do this. They do it like 2 or 3 times, and then they just kind of go.
They're like
I
one
don't know."
sentence
Yeah.
descriptions of a character.
Yeah,
And look, here's another example. Hiddleston's character at the start. Look, you know what? If this gives a little bit away, I don't think it really will. It starts in a seedy bar in Asia. He's an ex-SAS soldier, has all of these skills, and obviously he's got this checkered past. He's been decommissioned, and he's now betting on pool, getting drunk, and getting into fights. But you know what? That's all you get. Do you remember an explanation as to what his real gripe was with the world, what was going on? No, neither do I.
Don't remember
And all
his
that happened
name.
was you just roll through the film and it's like, oh, well, I guess he's past those issues that he had because they haven't been touched on ever again. He's just like, I don't know. It gave me a headache watching. I couldn't understand why there was no character arc.
No.
They threw here. Well, it was a Jackson Pollock of characterization. Let's just splat paint at things, hoping it sticks and people get on board. But you know what? For a lot of people, they look at that canvas at the end of it and go, "What is this?
Yeah.
What is this? I don't know what this is." And it's like, can't you see the picture? And it's like, no, it's just.
Yeah.
It's specks of character that have just been mashed together.
And it's plotting pacing. It really is just one set piece to the next as they're kind of just traveling across the island, slowly getting picked off. introducing sort of larger and larger creatures, which are all depicted in broad daylight without any real, like no real thought, I thought, put into a lot of those set pieces. And you see so much stuff, it starts to actually erode the impact of when you see, bigger creatures towards, without giving too much away, but the stuff happens towards the end, most of which is in the trailers as well, I might add. I mean, almost everything is in the trailers.
It is a film that is so guilty of giving every decent part away in the trailer. It is, a 2-hour film, and if you've seen the 2-minute trailer, you've seen all you need to see.
The latest trailer shows that whole sequence with the helicopters. Literally every clever shot, and it probably is the strongest bit in the movie, is when he's swatting the helicopters out of the sky. All those great ideas and concepts for the visuals are all in the release trailer. It's all out there.
Let's talk a little bit about perhaps some of the positives that exist there, because I think we'll probably return to a lot of the negatives that do exist there, because there are a number of glaring oversights that exist inside of this film. You've mentioned the CGI and I guess the budget as well. Whilst in a narrative sense there's a lot of holes, did you find entertainment in some of the big sequences that exist that have been CGI'd inside of the film?
For me, what I was expecting and hoping for was Kong versus Beast, and I think obviously that's what the MonsterVerse is setting up. So there's going to be something comparable in size that will battle in the same way that Godzilla did. So I was expecting that, and when those moments sort of do eventually arrive, as far as just pure spectacle, there's some enjoyment to have there, but. Look, not really. I was sort of... it all kind of washed over me, and at the end I was just sort of like... I had no emotional connection to anything that happened. So...
I enjoyed Kong as a specimen, as a character. The thing... and again, I don't want to be overly negative about the complete production, but there are likeable elements, but I don't really know if it was because the film managed to portray that, or that's just inherent inside of the character at large. He's this lonesome primate that exists that, seems to be in this constant struggle with his environment. And I did enjoy those moments, but however, they were very fleeting inside of the film. But then leaving the cinema, I did think, isn't that just his character anyway? Or am I just piggybacking my previous concepts of Kong as a character on the back of this and saying, I enjoyed that about that character. It's like, well, this film didn't actually do that. It just, in some part, extended that notion.
I really played on my heartstrings from that one Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode where home was King Kong. And I remembered, and that was what really carried me through. Like that, you're definitely right. It's like, you guys know Kong. He's misunderstood and big and bad.
He's a victim in every film, really, isn't he? He's always been the victim. Like, humans invade his backyard.
They don't understand him, and they
kidnap him and try to exploit him. That's essentially what happens. I mean, this is slightly different. That they're not really trying to take him off the island as such. They're simply trying to survive. But again, he's the victim. I mean, they've rocked up in his backyard. They, as you see in the trailer, bomb the shit out of the landscape, just completely like it's. And I was watching, going, this is nuts, but humans probably would do that. Like, we don't have any real compassion for the environment. So there's just bombing this place that hasn't been explored by scientists. There's all this fauna and wildlife that they're just ripping the shit out of.
So do you know what? The opening scenes almost explain the whole depth of the film, where the guy goes, well, why would we go there? And he says, I don't know, cure for cancer, alternate fuel sources, just like lists everything that is the solution to mankind's problems, and goes, maybe, like, take your pick. And then it's like, oh, okay, then we'll go. All right, they mention the Russians as well. But, like, that's kind of what this movie is. It's like, I don't know, take your pick. Maybe it's one of these 7 things that people like about movies. Maybe it's one of these 7 things people like about philanthropy as a reason to go there. And they go, yeah, sure, go ahead. And it's like that exact conversation happened with, why should we make this film? I don't know. It's against war. There's some funny people in it. There's a monster. Like, maybe the Russians will do it first. We should definitely do this movie. And a Hollywood executive went, yeah, righto. Yeah, fully. It was,
and then just bomb the shit out of everything instead.
It's just carpet bomb it.
Yeah.
I think what we should probably touch on as well, which, if there was something that particularly bothered me inside of the film, it was this. And it's that the directors made a clear decision to kind of create ad hoc scenes from previous films and inject them into his own. with a very low level of success. The first one, well, the first film probably is Spielberg's Jurassic Park. I noticed there was a lot of scenes that seemed like nearly carbon copies of elements inside of that film that just weren't done as well. And that ended up bothering me because I feel like it when something like that is trying to pay tribute to such a seminal film like that and it fails and doesn't put its own spin on it, it just becomes far worse. It's nearly, it should have been on the cutting room floor. And I feel as though there was a couple of moments like that. I was like, you're referencing this, but you're not doing a good job at it.
It's constant, really. You could almost attribute a reference to every scene. I mean, Apocalypse Now has been talked about a lot because there's this long sequence where the choppers are flying over
Golden
and
red
bombing
sunset,
everything.
yeah.
And the guy dropping the bombs is very much the get some chain gun guy shooting all the locals. And you see the reflection of the bombs in his aviators glasses and everything. And Black Sabbath's Paranoid is playing over it, and it's this very sort of military scene. Actually, no, that scene is in Full Metal Jacket I'm actually referencing. So Full Metal Jacket and Apocalypse Now, but of course that famous chopper scene from Apocalypse Now. So
it has that war, that war vibe, that particular tone is very existent throughout the film as well. They return to that later on as well. I mean, it doesn't give anything away, but obviously, well, not obviously, but there's a napalm scene, and it's kind of got a little bit of that as well.
Definitely,
a lot of work off reflections and things like that are really really linked to the films that you're talking about there, I guess.
Yeah.
Samuel L's got a direct quote of his own where he says, "Hold on to your butts," and it's a line he has in Jurassic Park.
He does.
Yeah.
Does he say that in Kong?
He says that in Kong. Yeah, hold on to your butts.
He does.
And
I didn't notice that.
And in Kong, no, do you know what? In Jurassic Park, he says it as this overworked, overtired IT guy who's got about 12 cigarettes in his mouth at the time and knows that the guy that he's up against has got his number.
Yeah.
And in this, he says it as this sort of snide remark to people and like almost looks at the screen and winks. He's like, hold on to your butts. We're going to fight a monster. Like last time.
But I mean, you talk about the connection to Jurassic Park. I mean, if you played these films in a double feature, one is a masterclass in making a monster film. One is everything you could do wrong, really. And I think what really annoyed me probably the most, more than the characterization, is the fact that at no point is this film remotely scary, remotely thrilling, and they make no effort to build tension at all. There's so much stuff in it. There's never a build-up of tension.
I totally agree, and I think that the biggest mistake that they make is showing Kong so early. It's bizarre. It's like that...
Minutes, really.
You should take a Hitchcock mentality on that one and say, you know what, let's get this guy out in the last third of the film. You don't need to see him in full frame at all. Maybe a hand.
That's it. It's a hand here and there.
Anything. Just
the hint, the suggestion.
The presence is what you need, not just... not the personality there straight away. It blew my mind.
More so than that sort of build up of what is the monster like is, I remember very, very much when I went and saw Jurassic Park in the movies for the very first time, and there's that scene towards the end where the velociraptors jump up and they nearly bite Lex's leg that's hanging out through the vents.
Yeah.
And everyone in my row lifted their leg. Like it was one of those moments you were so invested. Like, oh my God.
That whole raptor sequence when they're in the kitchen, and
you felt it.
Oh, it's terrifying. It's a terrifying scene.
And with this, there's just no sense of
nothing.
That there are these. It's the difference between, and sorry, this does Aliens a disservice, but it's the difference between an action film and Alien, which was, a horror suspense film.
Yeah.
And this hinted towards being a horror suspense film, but was a crap action film instead, There were these little moments, little hints of like, oh, there's something lurking in the background here, and you're like, oh, what's going to happen? And then it just kind of, I don't know, kind of just sort of like regurgitates it out on top of you. It's a monster!
But, but going back to that raptor scene, I mean, you care about those two kids in Jurassic Park. Like it's actually consequential that they're being attacked and almost going to be ripped to shreds because there's characterization there that's been built up, as well as all that tension. And that's what this film's lacking. Like the opening scene of Jurassic Park is a guy getting ripped apart by an unseen dinosaur. There's flashes and a guy screaming. You don't see it. And then when the T-Rex first appears, that's like a 20-minute slow build lead up to that
Maybe
moment.
longer.
Yeah. From the moment they get in that rail car
Yeah.
and it's daytime, they start rolling through the park, to when the storm hits and they're just simply parked outside that enclosure, the goat pops up. That whole sequence is a build-up of
And
things.
it's at night.
At night time.
It's at night.
Yeah.
Everything was in the day in this film.
Nighttime is your friend if you're making a monster
And
movie.
they even reference it at one point in the film. And you know what? Look, if this is going to ruin the film for you, I'm sorry. But look, at one stage, they're like, oh, we've got to get inside. You wouldn't want to be out here when it's dark. And you know what? I guess the rest of the film didn't want to either. Because you know what? That was the last time we saw darkness in the film until right at the end. Apparently all the bad stuff happens then. It's like, well, that's the stuff we want. So someone's got to get locked outside at some stage and have to deal with that.
10 minutes later, there's a whole scene where the guys are outside for the night.
But
And nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Yeah, open
That's
flames.
right.
Wouldn't want to be out here unless you are, and then that's fine as well. It doesn't follow through. And if I could touch on one thing, that it's like a famous gripe in Jurassic Park, which you don't notice. You don't notice it because it's such a masterfully crafted film. Is that the Jurassic Park, the Tyrannosaurus Rex emerges from its enclosure, comes out onto the road, messes everything up, right? And then it knocks the cars
I know what you're
down
saying.
into its enclosure, and suddenly its enclosure is 50 meters deep.
Yeah.
That's come out of nowhere. There's this huge gaping error in that film where you're like, hang on, like it doesn't ruin, but there's a set piece that you go, wait, what do you mean? When did the T-Rex's enclosure become a huge drop? Because it managed to walk out of it not 4 minutes ago, but you're so held that you don't care. Whereas throughout Kong, there were so many moments when I went, wait a minute, didn't you guys just spell out for us how, like, Tom Hiddleston has a moment where he goes, we're spread out over 45 miles. Oh, hey, how you going, man? Good to see you. Didn't catch you there. Glad you're here. And everyone just comes together, and it's got this, you know, did you ever play The Curse of Monkey Island?
Yes.
And there's a whole joke about how you keep everything you need right inside your pocket.
That's right.
And there's
yeah.
a point where, like, you pull out this 2 meter long thing, and they're in on the gag. It's like, how would you ever hold all this?
That's right, yeah.
But they do that throughout this film, and it's just like, oh, do you have a flamethrower? Yeah, I do actually. Oh, good. Yeah, bring it out. Yeah. You got a couple of Bowie records? Yeah, I do. Hey, did you miss that enormous monster that was crushed by a helicopter that was miles away from where we were? Yeah, I didn't see it on the way in, but I saw it on the way out. Oh, yeah, good. Where did all this stuff come from? It just
materializes.
There's no continuity. Yeah.
I think we can agree there's some holes in this one. So I think let's just get down to our rating of Kong Skull Island. I'll start with you, Nick. What would you give it?
I'm going to give it 2.5, and I think that's being pretty generous. Yeah.
Joseph?
Look, of all the gripes that I've had with it, the cardinal sin that it made, I was bored. I was bored throughout. I can't remember a part where I was really genuinely wrapped in it. And so I'm going to give it 2. Dan?
Yeah, it made so many mistakes. There was at one point where I was just having a conversation with somebody inside of the cinema. And that's being brutally honest.
Yeah.
Like, just going, they can't be taking themselves seriously at this point. Like, maybe this is the way this film's going to go. It's going to be one of those ones that's like, we're in on it too. But they weren't. So, I don't know. I'm going to give it like maybe 1 3/4 just for Kong. And that's all for Kong.
Yeah.
Just because he was there and, yeah. That's it.
Remember your grand gripe at the end?
No?
Where's his dick?
True.
Yeah.
Where is his dick? Yeah, that's a good question.
Because they breed, so...
In
he has to
every
have a
Kong
peen.
film, he never has a penis,
Never had
does
a
he?
penis,
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. We'll
certainly-
have to look into this.
He's always attracted to the blonde lady protagonist, so he
Yeah.
must.
Maybe he's overcompensating.
I was saying perhaps maybe they've got an internal and it only
retracts.
Yeah, retractable penis.
So
It's called Cinema Dick.
we need we need a King Kong film where the lipstick comes out. I think
Oh,
one for the adults.
that'd be scary. Yeah, wowee. Yeah. Look, moving forward, let's talk a little bit about Kong though. I mean, he's a big guy. He's
About Kong himself, not the film he starred in.
nor his wang.
No. I mean, he is a big guy.
He's enormous wang.
So We could talk about Kong's Wang,
which
all
he can
night.
tuck away like nobody's business.
Yeah, that's it. The old tuck. He was the first one to do the tuck.
Yeah, way before Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. Oh. All right. Certainly one of the biggest monsters in modern
Buffalo
cinema.
Bill. It worked hard.
Oh no.
Kong versus Buffalo Bill. Who wins that? That's a big gorilla dress.
Oh, what have we become?
Dan, move along, please.
Yeah.
This is only going to get worse.
So, obviously, one of the biggest and baddest in cinema, but there's a lot of others as well. And I was thinking earlier on, who would actually win in a mono scenario? We're assuming that we're going to get a Godzilla v King Kong at some stage, so I guess we'll figure out who wins that battle.
I think we definitely are. I mean, they've announced Godzilla King of Monsters for 2019, but there's a film slated for 2020, which I think will bring those two together, unless the next one does in some capacity. So.
Well, I mean, that's a bit of a massive wink to the audience, isn't it, to begin with? If they're going to be in the same cinema universe and they're calling it Godzilla King of Monsters, and where does that leave King Kong? So they've got a... Well, but I think as anyone who's seen a King Kong a King Kong or a Godzilla film, I tell you, they're both good guys. It's always a bit of a struggle to explain it, why the guy that's destroyed everyone and crushed cities at the end is the good guy, but they managed to be that way.
Like Superman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Killed millions of people, but he's the good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what we've got here. We've got a Batman versus Superman showdown with these two.
Yeah.
And I think what's going to happen, and it's disappointing, is it will be this massive cop-out where we don't see... There won't be a winner. It'll be mankind are the winners. Somehow they'll have to team up on a greater threat. And I know that doesn't answer the question, but I feel like that's the answer we're going to get from this cinematic universe.
So a stalemate between that pair. I'm just not excited for it anyway, to be honest with you. I just don't see... I think adding another monster into this scenario, if they can't get it 100% right when they've got standalone films, then what chance do they have if they're sharing
40%.
screen time?
Look,
Then I'm getting the 51 to get a P.
I mean, I know you guys had mixed feelings about it, but I really liked Gareth Edwards' Godzilla. I thought it was really well done, and I liked the fact that it was a little bit humorless, but still quite enjoyable. Like, there wasn't really a cheesy comic relief as such. Like, that opening sequence with Bryan Cranston and Juliette Binoche and all that, you know, they imbued those characters with a lot of empathy and things like that. And I think he did a far better job in terms of characterization and just the visuals and the construction of those set pieces. I had a really good time with it. So I guess that's why I actually had quite high expectations for Skull Island. So I don't know. I mean, getting back to Godzilla, I think there's every chance it could be another interesting film. I liked that big showdown at the end of Godzilla with those two.
He made
mothy
interesting
things.
decisions as well with, you know, I mean, specifically with Bryan Cranston's character as well. I actually didn't see that coming. It was nice for some choices in the narrative to catch you off guard, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's something certainly that Skull Island didn't do. So, other than it being shithouse.
Do you know the problem with showdowns, I guess, as it were, when they come to Monsto, is you don't get any... Yeah, I went there. Give me a break.
Fluent Spanish.
What language is that?
I've spent time in South America. You don't know. Is it...
They called him El Monsto over there.
Yeah, that's what they scream as he tears through Cancun.
He's back. Yeah.
They generally just called me Cabron,
Which
which
is
I
Mexican.
found out what it meant later.
Oh, well, I have to know now.
I called a cab driver thinking it meant mate.
What did it mean?
It means cunt.
What
Oh.
was that? Cabron?
Yeah.
There's a Chili Peppers song called Cabron.
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
there?
exactly.
Is that what it
Yeah,
means?
there's a handful of songs.
I was
But
singing that
it's-
as a young man.
Yeah, no, it
In
was
Bible
you
study?
know, it's one of those ones that you can sort of be a bit like, hey, cabron, like in here in Australia, you can be a bit like, hey, how you going,
cheers,
cunt?
cheers,
And
cheers,
they're like,
cunt.
ah,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
there you go.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But it, you know, it flies in some South American countries and in others, and it doesn't.
Oh.
And when you're a white dude from Australia, it doesn't fly wherever you are.
So then say it's old Chapo or someone like that.
No, that was it. Said it to a cab driver, and he was horribly upset. And
Oh.
it didn't work out for a couple of weeks until I said to someone, I'm like, hey, I called a guy Cabron the other day, and they were like, what did you do?
Well, foreign monster.
Bringing it right back.
Yeah, let's get
Yeah.
back to it. So,
So listen, the thing with a monster versus a monster film is, and this is I guess when you have a showdown between a superhero and the bad guy, you tend to have a case of, the bad guy gets on top to begin with, and then the superhero goes away and he works out what he's done wrong, and therefore there's like a sort of a
growth of some
some description. Whereas when it's two monsters, you're not going to see them. Like one doesn't, sit down and have a bit of a think about.
It's a Godzilla training montage. Where survivors playing and
I was punching a building. There's people falling out of the building. It's like
just biting a ship,
which makes it difficult to get on board with the idea that monster versus monster.
Well, it's about the humans in between that, I guess. It's always, there's monsters and humans on some level. I mean, I think that's the important thing. Yeah.
I have a question for you both. So we've spoken about Godzilla and Kong because they're going to share screen time at some stage, one would assume. But where do those characters stand as far as the big bads are concerned? So there's been a couple of films. I mean, straight away, I think of Cloverfield had I guess it's a Godzilla, but you don't really see it. It's a giant monster. I mean,
it was an alien, wasn't it? From memory, it's meant to have come from outer space or something.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Again, though, a valid point. It probably doesn't matter because it's really the tapestry that's woven with the characters that are on the ground, the humans, that really sell that story. So you don't really need to know.
I think in 10 Cloverfield Lane, they're definitely aliens. I think those two films were in the same universe, of understanding. So yeah. So it's an out of interstellar beast, I suppose, but very much Godzilla, like in its destruction of a city. Yeah.
You got the Pacific Rim creatures
as
well.
Yeah, the kaiju.
Yeah.
Which that was a hell of a lot more fun than what this franchise has been so far, I've got to say.
Yeah.
Because this is meant to be a bit of a throwback to these classic Japanese movies with Kong and Godzilla fighting each other. Men in suits in a small constructed model city. And I think that Guillermo del Toro did a much, much better job of actually capturing the fun of those battles.
But it did feel fun straight away. And it had a very playful energy about the whole production, where it nearly felt like that he'd removed a dimension inside of the film that was too harsh or gritty or Ritty or Greel. Gritty, real. It's like he removed certain elements in order to just really hone in on what he wanted that film to be, and it nearly feels cartoonish at moments. It's just like the motivations of the characters are really like. I don't know, like the Karate Kid. It's just like, what I mean? Like it's one of those things.
It's Voltron.
That too.
But it can be that, it is a heightened reality movie. It's a fantasy film.
Yeah.
And so there is definitely space to be that way. If you go too gritty and real, like Skull Island perhaps tried to do, you end up with a kind of soulless, humorless sort of production. But Pacific Rim was definitely a lot of fun. So and big monsters, big robots. Like it was a really great popcorn flick.
And there's big money in them, and I think we're definitely going to see more of them.
Yeah, the sequel's not too far away, is my understanding.
The sequel to pretty much everything is not too far away for all of them.
Probably a couple of reboots in there as well. I think that's probably all we need to talk about for this segment. We'll come back and have a bit of a wrap of all the latest trailers for the final segment of Coming Attractions.
Welcome back to Coming Attractions. This is the last part of this episode. We're going to discuss an upcoming film that we saw the trailer of before Kong Skull Island, and it's the new Guy Ritchie film that's going to be about the King Arthur legend, Charlie Hunnam.
King Arthur, Legend of the Sword.
Legend of the Sword. It sounds like a great porn name for a film. I'm sure it won't be, from what we can tell. What was our impression, guys, and what are we sort of expecting from Guy Ritchie's take on the Arthur legend?
I was actually shocked that Ritchie was at the helm on this one. I didn't know this was coming out. It must have just gone under the radar, as it were. I don't know. It's been hit and miss over the years with the Camelot kind of story, hasn't it? There's been some good films, others. I don't know. Does Ritchie have the chops to do something that's, I guess, I'm assuming it's going to have some historical drama kind of element to it to some degree.
To me, it looks like a very stylized version. There's going to be some crazy special effects. It's going to be very much a fantasy take. I mean, the trailer itself has a lot of, it looks like a lot of magic and supernatural elements to it. So, look, I'm not the world's biggest Guy Ritchie fan. I know a lot of people still sort of look very fondly on his earlier films like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch and films like that. But to be honest, I mean, they've never been films I've really returned to very much. They left me a little bit cold at the time. So, and everything he's done since, the Sherlock Holmes movies and things like that, for me, are very much exercises in style over substance. There's not much depth to them, really. It's about the flashiness of the whole production. So I'll probably see this film. Like, it looks interesting, and the cast is certainly solid. You know, Jude Law is the villain. He plays a good villain. Eric Bana is in there as well as Uther Pendragon. So I think I'll go in with fairly measured expectations, to be honest.
I'm a big Guy Ritchie fan.
Yeah.
Big is maybe the wrong word. I am a fan. I love Snatch.
Mm-hmm.
Lock, Stock,
I've
I
heard
think
that.
is. Lock, Stock is
Easy now.
Lock, Stock. I didn't think was as good, but I get why people see them as a one or the other, but not you like one or the other. But it's a
Yeah.
I could understand why someone might enjoy that. I felt that he was the right man with Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
The second Sherlock Holmes was just a bit whatever. He's a hit and miss director, and when he hits, I feel like he hits it for 6, and it's important to say that he does hit it for 6 rather than that he hits it out of the park, because he is a very British director. He brings this very British sensibility, and he's quite proud that he's not an American, a Hollywood-style director, even though he totally is these days. But, he's gone back to something that is very, very British. And there's really nothing that's more British than the King Arthur legend. It is the basis of so much of the, I guess British folklore. It all comes back to this kind of thing. And I think he's the right man to do it. And I'm willing to give this a chance. I think it could be a really, like you say, there'll be a lot of Guy Ritchie style sort of trickery to it.
Yeah.
But I enjoy that.
Okay.
Flaggy, what do you reckon?
I don't know. As I was saying earlier, I'm not particularly excited about the concept. There's been some dullards in the bunch. Like what first night wasn't particularly great. And that had Connery and Gere in it.
I loved Excalibur as a kid, and I don't know if you remember that.
I never saw it.
I do not think I saw it.
But it's one of the more well-known ones besides First Night. And of course, Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah, well,
It's one of my favourite of all of them.
I'm happy to wet my whistle on that, but that's a different beast entirely.
It is. But do you know the interesting thing about a King Arthur film, and it's worth absolutely bringing up here, is that a King Arthur film tends to be a standalone. We've had, basically everything that we've discussed here in terms of King Arthur has been a film that has stood on its own merits, and that's been it.
Yep.
And apparently this one is supposed to be the first part. It's your reboot, it's your origin story of the Arthurian legend, which is then going to go they have prepared for 6 films. And that's when the problems start, because if it was Guy Ritchie doing a King Arthur film, and it is, I guess, do you know what? It's the other Arthur story that we haven't brought up is Disney's Sword in the Stone, which
True.
is just the story of Arthur, the forgotten idiot of the family, as it were, until he draws the sword from the stone, and that's when the film ends. He becomes the king, and the movie's over. And that's all they ever did with it. And it looks like that's kind of where they're going to go with it, is that it'll be this origin story. How does Arthur become king? And then they feel like they've got 5 other films to rinse out of it. And that's when I start to ask questions, because, I mean, a second one for sure. 5 more?
How much padding is there going to be? That's my question.
And how much will this set up for a sequel too? Yeah.
Because it won't stand alone at all. It won't be an insular thing where it'll be this one great film.
Well, there
and
are
that's
great
gonna happen
stories within that legend of, because, of course, there are the Knights of the Round Table, and there are actually all these amazing little sort of, offshoot stories of what the various knights did that proved that they were these worthy, chivalrous characters, and they deserve to be knights of Arthur's Round Table. And that's the kind of thing that you can go, okay, you want to make, I guess, a cinematic universe based on this idea. You're all part of Arthur's Round Table. That's where you could take it. You can't make 6 films about Charlie Hunnam being chivalrous and honorable and a king, and also his best mate's banging his wife, and maybe he's having it off with his sister. And there's a lot of stuff in the King Arthur legend.
I think I'd be more excited if we knew that maybe, Ritchie was attached for even half of the films. But that's the other issue that's going to exist with it, that there won't be any narrative consistency. He'll come on for this one film. The second one might be average, and then the next 4 that come out will be by a bunch of directors that we perhaps don't know. They might cut characters out. It's just they've set up for too much, when really they should just make sure that the first cab off the rank is the best one and it can stand alone. I just don't see it happening.
Well, I mean, that's got to be the hope, you would think, is that I think it's for myself the prototype of the great setup is Star Wars, where it finishes when it was released, it was just called Star Wars. The very first episode, what we now know as episode 4, was a standalone film, which finished quite, I guess, it was a well-rounded ending. We're done here. This thing's over. And then they were like, George Lucas comes along and goes, no, guys, there's a whole backstory and there are all these other things, but that's based on whether there's money or not. And you would like to hope that maybe, because that is a good way to finish it. Hey, look, there's possible stories we can go with. It's the story of King Arthur. There's 1,000,001 stories to live off of, but do an enclosed, a story that holds its own. There's potential to branch off, but whether they do that or not, and they've stopped doing that. They've stopped doing that with virtually every big Hollywood film. You have to have your nods to what comes next.
I've got saga fatigue. I'm over it. I'm over it. I want one film that's good.
Man, I spoke about it for 30 seconds and you fell asleep.
I don't need 6 films. I'm not even sold on the first one. And they probably won't do a particularly good job on the first one either. So now I'm just like, I don't know. They're cash cows. This is just another cash cow. And they know if they make 6 films and they have enough epic set pieces, this is exactly like the Skull Island scenario. They're setting up for something, but you know what? The foundations are all wrong at this point. There's nothing to stand up on once the foundations are set. But there's money to be made. We've talked about this before.
Jude Law, Eric Bana, and Charlie Hunnam, I'd say there's some pretty solid foundations right there for a good film.
To a lesser extent, you'd say the same thing with John C. Reilly, John Goodman, Samuel L. Jackson, Academy Award winner Brie Larson, and Tom Hiddlesfield.
Yeah,
but you know what?
Hiddlesfield.
Yeah.
And the whole field of things he does.
Yeah.
Look, there's probably not a great deal of point delving into this one any further until we've seen it, and I think we're going to see it sometime in the next sort of 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's coming around quite soon.
At which point we will absolutely get it to you.
The sword will be pulled from the stone in no time.
And
actually, Sword in the Stone, a little bit of trivia, was the working title for Basic Instinct. But that's another conversation altogether. But yeah, look, I think what we're going to get is a very flashy, heightened reality version of King Arthur. Okay, that's not grounded in any kind of reality. It's style, and you can see that in the trailer. It's just all flashy camera work. There'll be a bit of slow motion fighting the swords, and then it'll be like all sped up again. This is what Ritchie does. It's what he did with Sherlock Holmes. It was like those sort of mixes of basic camera trickery, essentially, and that's what this trailer looks like. Anyway,
I might let you guys go to this one. I don't know.
I'm on board. I'm gonna give it.
I'm calling a Therian boycott from over this side of the table.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm going to put your foot down.
The sword will stay in the stone.
I didn't know we could do that. I thought we had to go see these things.
Yeah, well...
You're saying we can only go and see the good shit?
After the Kong experiment, I feel like the rules may have to change moving forward.
Yeah, okay.
Look, anyway, that's probably all we've got time for this time at Coming Attractions. Please head to our website, comingattractions.com.au. You can actually read Nick Milligan's review of Kong Skull Island. It's there in all its sexy glory.
There's a handful of ones we haven't discussed as well, so there's plenty of content for you to sink your teeth into.
Come to our Facebook If you've got any questions, queries, please leave them there. We'll address them in subsequent episodes. And as always, thank you for watching. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Nick. I've been
Thank you.
Dan.